everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wolfson. I'm so excited for today's interview. Today, I'm actually speaking in person in San Francisco at the Roxham TV beautiful studio, and I'm speaking with Denelle Dixon. She is the CEO and Executive Director of Stellar Development Foundation. I've actually known Denelle for years, so this was actually a really great opportunity for me to catch up with Denelle, but also for our listeners to learn about what Stellar Development Foundation is doing, how blockchain technology is being used for good, and to help those in need with aid, for instance. That's just one of the use cases that we talk about in this episode. This interview, we really focus on blockchain as a technology and how that's being leveraged today. We talk about real world assets, for instance. We talk about tokenized bonds. It's just such an interesting interview with Denelle. We also talk about regulations and what's happening here in the United States and globally. So I encourage you guys to stay tuned for this whole interview. Denelle is really insightful, and I don't want you guys to miss anything. Okay, before getting started with today's episode, I also want to take the time to thank our sponsor behind today's interview, which is Kula DAO. Kula DAO is a really great initiative that is also leveraging blockchain technology for good using a DAO model. And we're just going to take a minute or two to hear a little bit about what Kula DAO is doing.
With the Kula token, you can shape, decide, and direct. Kula's value can be traced in the land beneath your feet. Kula is not about holding, it's about building. We haven't waited for legal systems to catch up. Kula is more than rules, it's results. Our goal is not just returns, it's restoration, repair, and empowerment. You're not owning a piece of the asset, but you're given a voice to become a part of the community.
Okay, the moment you all have been waiting for, let's get started with today's interview. Hey Denelle, how's it going?
It's great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming here. We're here in San Francisco at this incredible studio, and I'm so happy that you joined me in person.
Yeah, me too, these are always better in person.
Definitely, I agree, and it's just so coincidental that we're both in San Francisco at this time.
It worked out very well.
Yeah. So Denelle, before we get started with the questions, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do at Stellar Development Foundation?
Sure. So I'm Denelle Dixon. I'm the CEO and the Executive Director of the Stellar Development Foundation. We focus a lot, our mission at the foundation is creating equitable access to the global financial system. That's what we do. I've been there for 6 years. Just a little bit more than 6 years. And it feels like a lifetime, but I love what we do. And before that, I was in tech and I was a lawyer and did a bunch of other things.
Wow. Now, did you create Stellar Development Foundation? And we're just going to say SDF for short. Were you the creator of it?
No, Jed McCaleb actually founded the network. He had some co-founders. And David Mazieres actually founded the consensus mechanism for Stellar. And simultaneously, they founded the Stellar Development Foundation, so SDF. Okay. So they did that in about 4 years before I came.
Got it. Okay, because you've been there for a very long time.
Yeah, yes.
And we've met previously, like years ago.
Yes, years ago. Way back in the day when it felt like everything was like on the precipice of starting. And yet, boy, were we wrong. Like, I know. We're still kind of on the precipice, but it's such a different world today.
Definitely, and we'll get into that. And then before we get started, I want to know, and also the listeners probably want to know, what is the difference between Stellar, the network, and SDF?
Oh, it's a great question. So the network is actually the underpinnings. Think of it as like the internet, that one thing that underpins the internet for the content side of the web. Stellar is built for what I call the financial side of the web. So it is like the network infrastructure that actually moves the value and creates the accounts. The Stellar Development Foundation is the entity that actually helps to grow the ecosystem around Stellar and also really supports even from a technical standpoint. So we actually build the code in conjunction with the ecosystem participants that also support the growth of the Stellar network. So one is the network, and then we are, at the SDF, we're the foundation that supports the growth of the network.
Okay, so you support growth of the Stellar network.
That's right.
And Stellar is a blockchain. It's a layer 1 network. It's been around for a very, very long time.
One of the oldest ones. They call us OG, which I actually think should be a positive thing, but sometimes people say it to us to make us feel like we're not important anymore. But I feel like we've been around for 11 years, and the Stellar network has been around for 11 years, also SDF. And if you think about just like consistency and like everything that's building and growing, we have been consistently focused on payments, asset issuance, growing the ability to be able to move money like email since way back when, which is not to say that it's one of the things that I think I'm really proud of, that we've not gotten focused on the shiny objects around us.
I think it's good that Stellar has been around for so long. I mean, it definitely shows that there are use cases being built there and that it's a wonderful network.
That's what everybody said. It's so funny because people always come to us. Sometimes they don't say it so publicly. Sometimes they say it confidentially. But it's so nice to see that you guys are focused on like really making this valuable and really focusing on utility. We actually think utility is kind of sexy and kind of cool, and it's not been one of the things that every network has focused on. I do think, though, like over the last year and a half or so, we've seen a lot more players out there focus on utility, which makes me super happy, because I don't think that there should be one network to sort of win it all. I think that the value of having different ecosystems out there is that you can pick and choose like what's really good on this one, what's really good and useful on this one. And so you have choice and competition, and that breeds like much more valuable ecosystems.
Definitely, and that's so important within the Web3 community.
Of course.
But we'll get more into that. I want to know a little bit about SDF, the goals there, what you guys have been doing, and what the purpose is.
Yeah. So the mission is to create equitable access to the global financial system, leveraging Stellar, the network. We actually are really, we very much focus like a traditional organization where we have OKRs that we set every year. This year we have 3 OKRs. One of them is around asset tokenization. And we were number 1 in tokenization for a really long time for real world assets. And then of course Ethereum came, and Ethereum's number 1, we're still number 2. We have a goal this year to have tokenized real world assets on the network at 3 billion. So we're progressing towards that goal. We have a lot of players that are focused on asset issuance and that you'll see coming out in the next months and quarters. The second area is we really focus on addresses, so accounts. We used to call them accounts. We're trying to move to the industry language of addresses. And we want to see 5 million additional addresses added to the account, but they're payment addresses. And that's important to us because our foundations are a lot about payments and the movement of value. So not just the holding of the value, but the movement. So we're pretty far into that goal this year, and things are looking really good with respect to it. So that's the second one. And then the third one is really focused on Sorbonne, which is the new DeFi platform on Stellar. And we want to see us in the top 10. So these are all based on, in terms of total value locked, and these are all based on outside measurements. So we're not just like picking measurements and trying to like beat them ourselves. We're actually really trying to leverage the measurements that are out there in the world and sort of achieve those consistently.
I see. And so let's talk about real world assets, for instance, because I didn't realize that Stellar was number 2 for real world assets being built and leveraged and all that, just right behind Ethereum. Let's talk about some use cases there and why it's important, and maybe explain for our listeners, because not everybody is as crypto savvy as other listeners.
For sure.
What is a tokenized real world asset, and how is that being used today?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think that so many people use the RWA language and they don't know what that means. So one of the things that I love about our story and our journey on tokenization, so we've been tokenizing assets on Stellar since the beginning. Those a lot of times were fiat-backed assets, so those assets that were like either dollar-backed, or they were real-backed, or they were yen-backed. Those assets have been built on Stellar for the last, probably for the last 10 years. Like we really were focused on, we wanted to move value with stablecoins. So we were using that stablecoin language and that for a really long time. So those are like the first assets that really came out kind of on any network. In 2019, I had been at the foundation for like 5 months, 6 months. And we had our first Meridian, which is our annual conference. And right after Meridian, I saw an SEC filing from Franklin Templeton. And in 2019, in November 2019, they went to the SEC to get approval to build a money market fund on Stellar. They hadn't talked to us. We had no idea. Like, this is the beauty of open source technology. They had found the technology themselves. And so they started building, and they got the SEC's permission to be able to move in that direction. We've now obviously spent a bunch of time with them, but Franklin Templeton was the first money market fund to issue, and it issued on Stellar. So if you just think about your traditional money market funds, you sometimes have checks associated with them if they're in bank accounts, like what we consider bank accounts traditional, and you get yield. You get usually like what they're Treasury backed, US Treasury backed, so you get yield on them. Well, what Franklin Templeton did as the first player to move to this is they actually put it all on chain. And they wanted their books and records to be on chain. They didn't want it to just be like this asset that they still used all of the underlying old infrastructure. They wanted to move it all on chain. And so that's what they did. And the SEC allowed them, at first they had to do training wheels to use the old databases, and then they actually and Stellar at the same time, and then they got to drop the old databases. So Franklin Templeton's money market fund was the first one that was built. It's truly that all the books and records are on Stellar. Even though they've issued on other chains, their books and records sit on Stellar. And part of the reason for that is that Stellar had already had clawback functionality, all the things like compliance tools. It was built into the network layer. And so Franklin really FT took and used those assets. And so that was the first one. They issued officially and publicly, I think, 2 years ago, and they've been growing that asset the whole time. And then lots of other people have followed. Not as, they run validators on Stellar, Franklin Templeton does. Again, they've issued on other chains as well, which I think is important for them to be able to do. But not every asset issuer has done it the same way, with like books and records fully being on chain. But Franklin has. We also have Wisdom Tree that puts bonds. So just think of your normal bonds that you go buy, and you buy bonds through your broker or whomever. You can just buy it on Stellar. You can buy them through Wisdom Tree's app. What's super important about those two examples, and there are many others, SocGen, there's Etherfuse, there's a lot of different others that have come to the network and built on it. What's important is that I literally went to Franklin Templeton's wallet, which is Benji, and I purchased it on a Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m. I moved money from my bank account into it, and I purchased the Benji asset, which is the money market fund, and it was done in 2.5 minutes. After my KYC, so I put all my stuff in there to know your customer, and it got through. So you can do it all the time. It's real-time purchase, so you can do it at that point. So that's a really important piece of leveraging traditionally these assets that were only available to people who could get brokers or who could move into that. Now anyone can do it. And the other thing that I think is really important is that what we're seeing, and why does this matter to us? Because we're trying to create equitable access, right, to the global financial system. Well, not everybody in the world can purchase these assets that are issued in the US. But even in the US, it used to be that you needed to buy into it at like $2,500, and now you can buy into it at $25. So it does open the marketplace up to other players in the space. So that's the real world asset piece, and that's why there's a ton of value to buy these assets online.
Yeah, I love that. I just love the way you break that down, because I think a lot of people don't really understand what tokenized real world assets are. And right now that whole space is like blowing up. But it's interesting because Stellar has been doing this for years. Yep. And now we're seeing all of these, as a journalist, like all of these articles on tokenized real world assets today. I know, it's funny. And it's also funny to me that people don't always understand why. That's really valuable to the end user. As I said, the 25 versus 2,500. It's also really valuable to the asset issuer. If you're truly using the open source public network, you don't have to pay the infrastructure costs that you were having to pay before to have several different databases running. You don't have to have people managing the 10 different databases that you had. You can then deploy those people to different parts of your business and be more creative. So the reasons that Wall Street are now interested in it, yes, you're opening up your customer base, but a lot of it, you're making it more efficient internally. So I love it. It actually is everything that's super valuable about this technology. I would say that I love it when these assets can be held by everyone instead of just the people in the US, for example. But like Franklin has issued assets outside the US as well. In different parts of the world. So now you can hold them other places, and they're US Treasury-backed assets. But I see that these kinds of assets, these real-world assets, I see there are going to be a lot of interest
to people, because while stable coins are going to be interesting in the US still, because it's a really easy way to move money, US Treasury-backed assets are going to be really interesting outside the US, because people not only want to hold dollars, but they want to hold dollars that are yield-bearing dollars.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's follow up on that, because that is a really interesting topic you just brought up. But I also want to talk about how tokenized real-world assets is helping with financial inclusion in other parts of the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that SDF has a partnership with the United Nations. Maybe you could talk about that as well.
Yeah, so in that case, the UNHCR, which is the refugee part of the UN, has been using Stellar to be able to deliver aid into different countries for the last 3 years. And so it's amazing when you think about, they're using stablecoins to do it, so they're not yield-bearing assets, those are stablecoins, but it's still like a dollar-backed stablecoin. And the thing that's been really interesting, again, like, why do people, like, you don't want to fit a square peg into a round hole and just be like, use blockchain because it's cool. Although I know AI is way cooler than blockchain now, but you want it to make sense, and you want it to be like for a good reason. Well, the UNHCR has saved so much money by leveraging Stellar to be able to move the dollars into and to deliver this to the refugees or to the intended recipients. They use a digital wallet. It can send a text message. There's a bulk disbursement tool that SDF has built, and that can be now leveraged. It's an open source piece of code. You can put like thousands of payments in at once. And so the UNHCR can push a button, send all of these text messages to the aid recipients. The aid recipients receive the text, and it says you are eligible to receive aid from the UNHCR. Download this wallet. They download the wallet, type in their information. So within 2 minutes, they have their aid. And then they can, because the MoneyGram is a partner on the network, you can move the money to your bank account through MoneyGram at no cost to the end user, or the end user can decide, I'm just going to take a little bit of it out in the local currency. So they have, let's say they get 100 USDC, you can take out $10 and $10 worth of local currency, and then you can use it, and you can kind of use it as a bank account to the extent that you don't have one. It's super valuable. The UNHCR has sent over $5 million of aid over the last several years. And in just that amount, they've saved $12 million from their own costs, that they no longer have to have the security around the money if it's like cash that they're delivering. It saves them in terms of the people that have to be deployed within the countries. So it's pretty cool. It's one of my favorite areas that we've worked on, because not only is it helping humans, it's also demonstrating the true value of the technology, moving money as simple as email.
That's amazing. And so is it USDC that's leveraged?
Right now, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. It's interesting, and I don't know how this works, but maybe you do, but you said they're saving $12 million. And I'm assuming, like, when I make stablecoin payments, it's pretty instant. I'm assuming that the money also gets to the recipients much faster.
Yeah, just in seconds, right? That's the thing, that from start to finish, if they haven't downloaded the wallet already, it's less than 3 minutes that they receive it. So the way that they're saving money, there's a lot of internal efficiencies that are created by this. First of all, they can track it very simply. It's on the public blockchain. They can show their the donors where the money is being deployed. They can show that it's being deployed to those regions. They don't have to have all of the folks go into the different countries where they're deploying the capital. It's easier to be able just to use customer service and to use support, and the wallet actually does that from that standpoint. So I think it's just a really efficient use of the technology, and of course, like, we love it because it helps people.
Definitely. And then MoneyGram is also, and I think, an important element there, because you mentioned, and I remember hearing that news, I think that happened a while ago, where MoneyGram partnered with Stellar, which was huge news. When was that? Like a few years ago?
Well, I started at SDF in May of 2019. Some of my very first conversations in that month were with MoneyGram, because I saw this as a huge opportunity to be able to bring MoneyGram as that on and off ramp to the network. Took a couple years for us to get to the place. So I think we launched in like 2021 or 2022 officially. When are we in? Yeah, 2022, I think. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But I think that it's around that time period. But we had already built the prototype of what was necessary to translate like MoneyGram's language into Stellar language, and then back and forth. We called it very creatively an adapter. So that just allowed that transfer of language between the two of them. And so what we really were trying to do there was to take advantage of what MoneyGram had created, which is this amazing moat by having agent network all over the world that could be leveraged by every wallet provider out there. And that then you could bring cash into MoneyGram and then cash it into a USDC asset, and then you could do what you want with it at that point. It's in your digital wallet. Or you could cash out, and you can cash out at any location. You know, they had 480,000 locations globally, and you could cash out anywhere into the local currency. So it was the one piece that was missing in blockchain and crypto, because we always said, isn't it amazing? Like blockchain and crypto, we can totally replace everything in the financial, that's in the traditional financial infrastructure, except we never figured out the on and off ramps.
Right.
And so this was the first time where we were so excited about creating those cash on and off ramps, which is what people who don't have bank accounts actually need. So it was great. And we've leveraged that. Now you can move money into bank accounts from them because they have those relationships already globally. So it's been a great partnership, and we've been working with them for years as a result of it.
That's wonderful. And with the United Nations partnership, is that all outside of the United States?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you think we're going to start seeing some of that model and that use case implemented here in the United States for people in need and communities that need help?
Well, I think that, we've seen a lot of really great movement with this administration and a really good focus on the value of the technology. You even saw Trump, maybe 3 weeks ago, talk about moving the USAID, putting that under the State Department so that they could then actually deliver aid and leverage blockchain to do it. I think that there's a huge opportunity to use blockchain to make payments for taxes, to be able to receive your refunds and that. That's probably a bit of time away, realistically, but it doesn't take that much to be able to leverage even those pilot programs. So I do think it's really possible. And if anywhere, I'll say it this way, I think that it's just so simple to be able to leverage an open public network because you don't have to build and maintain the infrastructure. You can choose to be a part of it, but you don't have to. It just makes sense because it's constantly being updated and by everyone who's in the ecosystem. I think it makes way more sense than using closed source software that it gets stale after a while. So I hope we do see movement there. I think it's gonna. I think that the Trump administration has done a great job focusing on the value of blockchain.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm hoping to see some more action in that area. So we'll see what happens.
Utility.
Right. Other than the price of Bitcoin going way up and then down and just back and forth, I do hope to see these use cases emerge here.
Me too.
Let's talk about the Stellar Disbursement Platform. Did I say that right?
You did. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about it. What is it? What is it doing?
Yeah, so that's what I just mentioned in terms of what the UNHCR actually leverages for its work, how they can put in thousands of transactions at once. That platform can be leveraged outside of aid. It can be my favorite use, and I really want to see this happen. We're already seeing it being used to pay gig workers globally. I want to see it be used to pay payroll. Because if you think about that's all you really need is that you can disperse, and you can disperse to people who have wallets already, because then you just put the account the address that you want to send it to. Or if they don't have the wallet yet, you can send the text message to say, download the wallet to be able to receive it. So the Stellar Disbursement Platform is that open source piece of code that just allows this movement and ease of use. Like at the push of a button, you can send thousands of transactions at once. That's exactly what this technology can do, and it hasn't, and so it's picked up a lot, and we see a lot of opportunity space there.
Wonderful.
And wallets can just integrate that in their tech stack, and then it just becomes available from an enterprise standpoint to be able to do that.
When was that platform developed? We
developed the early stages of it for the UNHCR, actually. We started talking to the UNHCR. They were originally focused on giving aid into Ukraine right after the war started. And so we started building this in April of that year, right after the war in Ukraine began. And we really kind of built it for that use. And so it's now been in effect since that year. So they started using it in November of 3 years ago. And so for them, it's been in use that whole time. And then we've seen other wallet partners pick it up and leverage it over time. So it's been around for a while. I think it's just a simple piece of code to use. And so we're seeing more and more folks want to integrate and be able to leverage that. And I think that that's the future.
Yes, for sure. What are the biggest challenges that come about? I mean, we've talked about all of these use cases where we're seeing people outside of the blockchain space using blockchain and sending stablecoin payments. Has it been challenging to get these, like the United Nations, has it been challenging to get them on board?
Yeah, that's such a great question because it just depends on the entity, right? For MoneyGram, we started talking in May of 2019. It took 2 years, 2.5 years to get them to be like, oh, okay. And the way that I got them to come was to basically say, blockchain and crypto says that it's going to usurp and take over everything that you do. In fact, you have like this really special thing that you can actually bring to blockchain and crypto. And so that's how they made that move. It's hard because so few, like especially under the prior administration in the United States, so few companies were concerned about touching any crypto-based assets. And stablecoins, even though they're backed by fiat, there was still a concern that banks shouldn't touch it. So we saw so much interest in companies, banks, asset issuers wanting to come, but they were very concerned. So that was a really big challenge. I still think like even in the, I was just in Europe 2 weeks ago, and there's a lot of asset issuers that want to really play in this, but they're still a little bit cautious because they're not sure like what their regulators are going to think. So I think the regulatory environment domestically and in other parts of the world, for different reasons, have been challenging. For example, there are countries, if you think Nigeria, take Nigeria for example, or even in Brazil, if they're currency protecting countries, they get really worried that any kind of an asset like this could come in and disrupt their currency pretty dramatically. We actually think that any even US dollar-backed asset that came into the country converts to local currency so it can support the growth of their currency, but it takes a little time. So I think the regulatory environment is a challenge. And I'll just be honest and say that I think that a lot of the other challenges that I've seen over the last 6+ years is a lot of shiny objects in our industry, and it's sometimes hard to focus on utility.
I agree. I mean, we hear all the time about meme coins and this coin surging and obviously the price of Bitcoin and the price of all these tokens, and we forget the use cases, and then people think that blockchain is really only related to crypto.
Exactly.
They don't realize that it can actually be a useful tool for getting aid to people in need very quickly at a much better cost, right? More cost efficient. So that's what I love about what you're doing at Stellar and what SDF is all about, because I think that it's a lot of this aid and helping communities in need.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I think the secondary market is what made the crypto industry really have a voice and a space. So the fact that you do have all those assets that are out there has really given it that voice and that volume. And I also think that the secondary market made it really hard for the tech stack to have an appearance, because so much of it is there was focus on the crypto assets and not, back in the early days of the web, we were able to get focus on the content companies that were building on top of the web. They actually showed the use of that technology really well. Because we had so much focus on the crypto assets, the technology sort of sat for a while.
Right.
Now it's in full surgence, and I think that we're seeing, we'll see a lot more utility, and we already are seeing a lot more utility. And even the meme coins, they're like the playing cards, right? They're like the trading cards of my generation. And so when I think about it still demonstrates the flexibility and the way that you can sort of make this technology into lots of different things, which I love. I just wish that we had a lot more good focus on the utility, which I think we're getting now.
Right, and there are some meme coins out there. I mean, I'm not a fan of meme coins personally,
Yeah.
but we have seen some meme coins that are actually used for fundraising and helping communities in need. I mean, you probably know of some. So they're not all just like these pump and dump schemes where you see the price go up and then, people sell. But
right. It has given this industry this complicated sort of backdrop.
Yes.
And when I meet with regulators domestically, internationally, because I spend probably 25% of my time focusing on regulation in all these different countries, including the United States, it is the question that a lot of them ask, well, what about these meme coins? And what about this? And this isn't really maybe this is and it's not, it sometimes doesn't show the strength of which the technology is. But I think ultimately we're heading in that direction. So I think it's fine. We just have to be really focused on showing the value of the utility.
Definitely. Shifting gears a little bit, because you said that you were a lawyer, or you have a law degree.
Yeah.
What attracted you to the blockchain space? And I'm guessing it has something to do with the technology and how it can be used for good.
Yeah.
But
so I was a trial lawyer. I loved being a trial lawyer. I did that for 10 years, and it was super fun. A lot of what I can do but I loved it because you're constantly having to think about I used to call it your goals, your strategies, and your tactics. As a trial lawyer, it doesn't mean that you always want to win the case. It means that, you kind of always do. I kind of always did. But your client might just want the case to settle, or your client might want to get a business relationship out of the case. So you always had to be thinking about the strategy of what made sense to the client. The same is true in tech. Like there's the tech that you can leverage the tech for lots of different things, and you always have to be thinking strategically what is the best value for it. So I was at Mozilla. I was the COO there, and I was sort of at this like perfect trifecta of policy, tech, and business. I love thinking about like how to leverage tech to get to a business goal and a business outcome, revenue generation, whatever that might be. But policy always has to come and be a big play in it. And then Jed McCaleb, who's the founder of Stellar, he found me, and he brought this opportunity. It was a very Stellar. SDF was very small at the time, but it had that same trifecta. The one thing I loved about working at Mozilla is that I could advocate for policy that wasn't just about my products, because it was about the open web, and it was really focusing on delivering value of this tech into the world that others could build on. And the same is true for what I do now. When I think about my policy, I think about policy isn't just relevant to what SDF and Stellar are doing. It's relevant to like broadening the strength and the value of this ecosystem at large. And so it's been like this perfect. I always have said this, I will never have another job. Like, I love what I do because I get to touch on, like, in here, from the business standpoint, I get to work with these like founders or small to medium sized enterprises where they're building and using this tech and helping them to figure out their revenue models. It's really cool. Leveraging the tech for the benefit of the humans who are all over the world that don't have access to the same things that we do here. That's what this tech is really great for. And then from a policy standpoint, helping regulators and policymakers figure out how they should think about new technology and how they should think about open source. And so it's sort of like, it's the perfect job for me, like the way my brain works and the puzzles that you can put together. And so that's what's been so amazing about it.
Let's talk a little bit about regulators and regulations in the United States, because you've been in the industry for a while, as you know, I have also been in the industry for a while, and we've seen a lot of changes happen from when we first started to now. So, and is that also a reason why we're seeing real world assets kind of blow up now, because regulators are finally understanding it? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think the regulatory environment under the prior administration in the US, I initially didn't really have a view on crypto and blockchain. And then there were certain players that were friendly with that administration that had a view, like Senator Warren. Others had a view on that it was not good, that crypto and blockchain were not positive. And that sort of took over and became the view of that administration. You had Gary Gensler as the head of the SEC. We had all these really it felt very much like there was persecution of this industry. And so nobody in the traditional financial infrastructure was going to stand up and be like, no, but wait, we like this industry. Like, this makes a whole bunch of sense to us. And frankly, they probably weren't going to spend the time understanding why. And so the regulatory shift here has not just opened things up here, it's also in the United States, it's opened up from a global standpoint, to say, okay, now, because everybody wants this user base in the United States. And it's funny because during that time period, lots of people in crypto and blockchain were like, well, we're just going to leave the US and we're not going to focus on this US market. But really, are you going to? You really want this market to be a part of it. And so that regulatory shift and that openness to this technology and thinking about it as a tech stack instead of thinking about it as this bad thing that we shouldn't have in play has been game-changing. And I think game-changing for real-world assets. Now we have traditional financial infrastructure okay, we're ready now, we're ready to go play. Kind of globally, a little bit still tentative about what this looks like and how it works for them, but we're seeing it all over the map, and it's pretty great. So It's definitely a regulatory shift. It's a good thing to see that we can have an impact on the regulation. It took way too long in the United States. I always thought there was low-hanging fruit, like stable coins and market structure. I thought we should have gotten those things through. It's good to see that we can have an impact on policy. It is disappointing to me that policy and regulation can have such a negative impact on the tech. That's the thing. I always thought about, when you think about policy, and this is how I always advocate for it, you got to think about the outcomes that you don't want and the outcomes that you do want and regulate there. Don't regulate at the tech stack. Regulate at the outcome level. And we weren't doing that.
Do you think we're seeing that with AI? I mean, obviously, you mentioned AI a little bit, but artificial intelligence, it's huge now, but, regulations and everything around that also needs to be set.
I hope even we do that here, I get really fearful because there's a lot of fear around AI, just like crypto and blockchain. There was fear around what it could do to financial markets, and a lot of lobbyists sort of from the banking side that lobbied against it. There's fear around how it could harm people, how it could take jobs away. All that fear a lot of times leads to bad regulation. But I think that, and also, this is so funny, when I think about also what happened in May of 2019, is that's when Libra sort of came into view, and like when Facebook came in to think about it, and that actually activated a ton of regulators because they were so worried about Facebook having so much control. So it also depends on the who, and OpenAI has obviously been before Congress, and they've really tried to understand or maybe persecute, I'm not sure. So I think that, again, if we focus on not regulating technology at the AI level and regulating the outcomes you don't want outcomes that are going to harm a particular class of humans. You don't want outcomes that are going to be bad for certain businesses. So regulate against that. I think it remains to be seen how that happens. We haven't seen a ton of regulatory focus on it this year. We did see a lot of attention last year, but not this year yet.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Stellar again. Now, Stellar's cryptocurrency is XLM.
Yep.
And I know we've been talking a lot about stable coins and how the partnership with the United Nations is using USDC, but is XLM being used for any of this?
It's a good question. It's actually this, it's something that people don't appreciate. We think that payments should always leverage a stable asset because you're receiving the same thing that you're sending. And that's important. When people are sending money, if you think about money is something and value is something that people have been transferring and moving and trading for thousands of years. And they want the value to be a stable value. A lot of crypto assets don't, and XLM included, they don't offer that kind of stability. And so we've always encouraged payments in stablecoins, but every transaction on the network uses XLM. And it doesn't use a full XLM. I think it's 1/100,000th of a XLM, or 1/100,000th of a penny is used. It's a Stroop, because Jed likes Stroop waffles.
Oh.
And he called it a Stroop. And so it's a Stroop that's used for every payment. So you have to hold, I think it's 3 XLM in your wallet to be able to make these transactions happen. So it is being used with every transaction. And it is part of the underpinnings of the network because it protects against spam and DDoS. If you didn't have an asset like that was the cryptographic asset that sort of sat there and made sure that there was a fee for the payment. Now these are tiny, tiny, tiny in terms of the amount of fees that are on Stellar, but there has to be, otherwise you're going to get spammed. The networks are going to just be spammed all the time. So that's what the XLM is used for. So it's a crucial part of what is used on Stellar.
Right, definitely. Now, before this interview, I got on X and I asked, I let everybody know that I'm interviewing you, and some people had some questions. And actually one question there were 2 of them that really stuck out, but one question that you just made me think of was, are we ever going to see a time in the near future when there will be point of sale systems in the United States with Stellar behind it, whether we can use USDC or XLM or anything like that? Is that in the works?
I want the answer to this to be yes. I think that what we always talk about is building blocks. I think that we are seeing a lot of adoption from the payments infrastructure standpoint. We're seeing wallets adopt Stellar. We're seeing that as becoming like a payment standard, certainly in certain regions, is like how payments are made. So you need to have those building blocks and those infrastructure layers, and you need to have this high demand for entities that are interested in that. And then the point of sale thing sort of comes after that. So we're already seeing those building blocks be built, and I believe the answer is yes, but is it in the works? I mean, it's in the works in that there's like an infrastructure layer being built for it, where the wallets are creating that payment standard. It's going to be really exciting to see it happen.
Yeah, I can't wait. And also just backing up a little bit, and I should have asked this kind of in the beginning of the interview, but why is Stellar such a great network for payments? Because it seems like that's the main use case here.
Yeah, well, it is. Asset issuance and payments is sort of what it was built for. There's obviously now Sorb on the DeFi platform. I always think about it as everyday financial services. So we think payments is part of the everyday financial infrastructure, and that is the movement and the easy movement of value. Jed used to always say, money should move like email. That's what he wanted, that's why he built it. And that's what we want to see. But the other part of it is you need all of the components of everyday financial services. And so where does it start? It starts with that bank account equivalent where you're actually generating potentially yield or just you're feeling safe about where your money sits. That actually can happen in Sorabon where you can actually put assets in and then generate yield. And then if you think about, so that's like sort of your savings and your yield bearing piece. And then you have the payments piece as being like what you do with the assets that you have. And that is, Stellar is so good at that because all the infrastructure is built in at the network level so that you don't have to have a smart contract to issue an asset. You can issue an asset on Stellar at the classic level. And you can actually then claw back the asset. There's all those compliance tools that are built in from an asset issuer standpoint that were built in at the network layer that make it super simple. If you think about how bank accounts work, if you mistakenly send money to someone or somebody gets into your account and hacks your account and takes it, you want the asset issuer to be able to claw that back to say, wait, that was a transaction that shouldn't have happened. These are tools that are in the network layer. And so the ecosystem has been really focused on building all of those things that need to be a part of a payment system, and they built it at the network layer so you don't have to have a smart contract to be a part of it. You can make it programmatic and you can build a smart contract to do all those things. But that's what's really great about Stellar is that it's simple. You can issue an asset with one line of code, and then you just, like what we've built in terms of I like to call it our moat, is that we have all these asset issuers and then these on and off ramps sort of globally that can be sort of brought together and connected, and then you have a global financial system.
Right.
For everyday financial services.
Right. And I know we've touched a little bit on DeFi, decentralized finance, but are there any other use cases in the works that you find really interesting and exciting?
Well, as I said, I love the idea of payroll, and we're seeing a lot more folks use the gig workers, paid gig workers using different wallet partners who are building on Stellar. The idea of using these yield-bearing assets outside the US to be able to allow people to hold these assets and to just generate their own kind of US dollar-backed treasury is something that we're seeing really take off. I love the aid piece. That's something that's really being built and coming even further and further along with other organizations. In the DeFi space, it's just super cool to see what people are building. There's a lot of different protocols that have built on Stellar that are allowing people to really take their assets, their crypto assets, and deliver value back to themselves. So I just think it's really hard to pinpoint. We don't know where that space is going to go in DeFi. I hope that we can focus regulators on not regulating. In the early days of the web, one of the things that regulators did really well is they pulled themselves back from regulating the tech, and they allowed the tech to grow, and look what it grew into. We're able to have conversations with people all over the world because of the web technologies. And so the same should be here. We should let the DeFi space sort of grow and show us what the outcomes are that they can get to. And then, sure, protect people along the way, but not try to kill the tech.
Definitely. Okay, and what about this liquid poetry? That was another thing, because I'm wondering, is that a DeFi use case? I actually don't know what that is, but that was another thing on X somebody wanted me to ask you about.
I think our community is pretty remarkable. This is one of the things I've been in open source for the last 20 years. I think open source technologies allow people to find and decentralize. So open source decentralized technologies allow people to build whatever they want. Liquid Poetry, I think, is a book that actually was built and put on Stellar.
Okay.
And I think that the cool thing about what folks are doing in this space is that they're sort of coming up with what either a solution that they want to see, and they build it to make it fit for them. But the ecosystem is amazing. And part of the reason why I love traveling around the world to see and to meet with Stellar ecosystem companies and ecosystem builders, because one of the things that I learned in the early days when I was working in just tech is that we always thought in Silicon Valley we could build for the world. And the truth is, we have no idea what the world's problems are. And the best people to solve those problems are local builders. And when I go and I see that things that we think might be a problem, but they can solve that problem and then maybe 4 others very differently, it brings like so much warmth to me, and it just makes me so happy to see it. And so people that are building in our ecosystem and just creating the things that sort of make them happy and that are going to delight their users makes me excited to see what's happening.
And speaking of that, I know that Meridian is coming up, and that's in Brazil.
It's in Rio de Janeiro, at the Copacabana Palace, which is right on the beach. It's like one of the most iconic hotels. We're really excited about it. It's in September 17th and 18th, and I highly encourage everyone. Meridians are so fun. It is like an opportunity to meet with everyone, small to medium to large institutions building on the network. We really try to bring everybody together. The reason why we called it Meridian actually was that we were the convener. So think about the way the Meridian sort of brings the earth together. We want to bring like the ecosystem together all the time. And they're really fun. It's a great forcing function for us too, because we like to get things done by Meridian. And so having it in September this year is going to be great.
Yeah, well, I know that I'm hopefully going to be in Brazil in September joining you guys, because I have yet to visit Brazil. And I just think it's amazing, like you said, to meet the builders, to meet the people working in the ecosystem, and to get to know what's going to happen next, right?
Yeah. And also one of the things we're really doing and focusing on Brazil is there's a lot of really interesting policy work that the Brazilian government has done, and also local folks in Rio and other places in Brazil. So we want to bring that to light too, because Brazil is like a hub for a lot of what happens in South America, Latin America, in terms of like they have strong policy presence, and so it's really exciting to see that too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know we're running low on time, so we're going to wrap up. Now, final question for you before I get into like your additional comments. You are obviously a woman in the Web3 space. You've been in it for a while, and I know some of the listeners are women, and they're probably wondering, like, how can they get involved? How can they get started in crypto and blockchain? Do you have any advice?
Oh, wow. And that's a great question, because it's funny, and you probably feel this way too, given how long you've been in the space. Like in early days, didn't feel like there was a lot of women that had joined into the space. Maybe it felt very risky. It felt very like bro-y. I don't think it's like that now. I feel like that it is like there's a lot of really good attention on female builders and what women have built and brought to this ecosystem. I say first of all, I'm happy to have folks reach out to me. It's Denelle@stellar.org. If you have questions around this, I love mentoring folks to be able to get into this space, but also just really dive in, because there's so much that you can do here. There's no set agenda about what needs to happen. That's what's cool about it, is you can just build.
Definitely, yeah. And it's interesting what you said. I remember I was like one of the very few women journalists in the beginning. It was like me and Laura Shin.
Yeah.
And now there's so many of us, and it's amazing. So I think that, women need to know that it's not that intimidating. It's not like a scary space, and it's actually a great space to be in as a woman. So I love it.
I do too.
Yeah. Wonderful. So any final thoughts, anything that we didn't cover that you want to mention before we close out?
I think you covered everything. I think that I love what we're building on Stellar. I think that this ecosystem at large in terms of blockchain and crypto just offers so much opportunity. And I want all of us to be really proud of what we've built today, and also very focused on what the future holds, because there's just so much that can be built and changed and grow. And so I just think that, there's so much that people talk about in terms of like turf battles and all of that. I just don't see it that way. I see like us as an opportunity to really create this amazing ecosystem of different networks that are out there that are each doing sort of their own focus and thing. And so no, I think you've covered everything.
Good.
And I think I'm really excited about where we're headed.
Good. Well, thank you again for joining me here at the Roxham studio in San Francisco. And definitely let's do a follow-up.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Special thanks to 4 Labs Digital for producing Web3 Deep Dive podcast. I'd also like to thank the sponsors behind Web3 Deep Dive. You can click the links in the show notes to learn more about each of the Web3 initiatives from these sponsors. Finally, thanks to the listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share.